Thorndale to the post office at 40 minutes on the outbound. Also 40 sluggish from Central to 25th Avenue. Inbound Stevenson. Heavy from Central to Kedzie. 355 to Lakeshore Drive 45. Outbound 40. Slow from Pulaski to Central. Inbound Dan Ryan. Heavy from the Stevenson to the Circle. 95th to downtown 24. Outbound 15. Inbound 57. Brake lights from 107 to the Dan Ryan. 80 to Dan Ryan 22. Outbound 15. Bishop Ford inbound, brake lights from 103rd to the Dan Ryan, 8094 Dan Ryan 25, outbound 15, Amity Manzano, and that's traffic. On AM 560, The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer is next in our 1-hour heating and air conditioning weather center. Our meteorologist, Steve Williams.
Periods of rain. It'll be a windy day. The high today at 64. Clouds and breezy tonight, low 45. For tomorrow, cloudy, breezy, and cool. Shower in spots, high 51. Partly sunny, breezy on Wednesday, the high 58. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
55 at O'Hare. Next news, 7:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Don't forget that you can watch Chicago's Morning Answer on the Income Store live video stream every morning at 560theanswer.com.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. So Hillary Clinton and Tulsi Gabbard getting into this. Maybe they'll soon be able to get into this on a debate stage when Hillary Clinton enters the race for president, hopefully before the year's out. Hillary Clinton on this podcast with David former Obama flack. He's got a podcast.
With his work.
Oh, yeah. Now he turned out to be a capitalist. Went to work for Uber, among other clients. Hillary Clinton on Tulsi Gabbard. You know, anybody who is not on board with the leftist orthodoxy, you know what they are. They're a Russian asset.
I think it's going to be the same as 2016. Don't vote for the other guy. You don't like me? Don't vote for the other guy because the other guy's going to do X, Y, and Z, or the other guy did such terrible things. And I'm going to show you in these, flashing videos that appear and then disappear, and they're on the dark web and nobody can find them. But you're going to see them, and you're going to see that person doing these horrible things. They're also going to do third party again. And I'm not making any predictions, but I think they've got their eye on somebody who's currently in the Democratic primary and are grooming her to be the third-party candidate. She's the favorite of the Russians. They have a bunch of sites and bots and other ways of supporting her so far. And that's assuming Jill Stein will give it up, which she might not because she's also a Russian asset.
Agent,
yeah, she's a Russian asset. I mean, totally. And so they know they can't win without a third-party candidate. And so I don't know who it's going to be, but I will guarantee you they'll have a vigorous third-party challenge in the key states that they most need it.
Tulsi Gabbard is Jill Stein as Russian asset third party 2020. Tulsi Gabbard didn't take too kindly to the obvious reference to her.
She didn't take long to respond either. It was great.
Calling Hillary Clinton the rod of the Democrat Party, a Madam Warmonger, and releasing this video statement.
People warned me in 2016 that my endorsement of Bernie Sanders would be the end of my quote-unquote political career. They said Clinton will never forget that she and her rich and powerful friends, her allies in politics and in the media, will make sure that you are destroyed. Well, there have been countless hit pieces full of smears against me from day one of this campaign. They've tried to destroy my reputation and my lifetime of service because I stood up to them. I've spent over 16 years of my life proudly serving in the Army National Guard. I still serve as a major today. I volunteered to deploy to the Middle East twice. I've served in Congress now for nearly 7 years, serving on the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Armed Services Committee, the Homeland Security Committee, and I am not afraid to openly express my love for our country. But if they can falsely portray me as a traitor, then they can do it to anyone. And in fact, that's exactly the message that they want to get across to you. That if you stand up against Hillary and the party power brokers, if you stand up to the rich and powerful elite and the war machine, they will destroy you and discredit your message. But here is the truth. They will not intimidate us. They will not silence us. We are not here just to protest their corruption. I am running for president to take the Democratic Party and our country back from the corrupt elite. I'm running for president to bring about a new Democratic Party and new leadership that will fight for peace, fight for the people, and protect our planet. So I want to ask every single one of you to join me in speaking truth to power. Don't be afraid. Let's root out the corruption in our party and our country. Join me to end the war machine's stranglehold over our leaders and ensure that our government is truly of the people, by the people, and for the people.
Sound like a third-party candidate to you?
Not really.
A Russian plant, Dan?
I also, it's fun. I mean, I enjoy the Manchurian Candidate as much as the next guy.
Yes.
But when you're going to accuse people of being traitors, of committing treason, or being groomed to commit treason, maybe they were programmed, and so they don't even know they're committing treason. Whatever your conspiracy theory is, I like to see some evidence, maybe. Especially after we've gone through 2.5 years of accusing the President of the United States of being a traitor, committing treason, being the Manchurian Candidate for Putin, Putin's man in D.C., sans evidence. I don't know. That's me, though. I'm a bit of a stickler when it comes to that. For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, Vice President of the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation, author of books including Wiki at War and Private Sector Public Wars. Jim, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, good to be with you.
So what do you think? How concerned should we be that the Russians may get their hands on Tulsi and prevent Hillary Clinton from being president again?
Yeah, well, I do policy, not politics. I don't comment on candidates and what candidates do. I will say I don't think the Russians have a lot of assets in the United States. I mean, we all know that Russians have tried to interfere with U.S. elections, and they've had very targeted influence campaigns. What I don't see a lot of is where's the evidence that Russian meddling actually moves the needle here? Not that we shouldn't hold the Russians accountable, not that it's not a really bad thing, but 330 million Americans who I think are more than capable of making up their minds for themselves. And so sometimes I think we kind of overplay this Russian concern and to essentially elevate our own politics. And I think this is the message here is things have become so cutthroat. People are so over the top that basically now, in order to get heard in the noise, you can say anything about anybody without a shred of credibility, and everybody just says, "Well, that's just politics. That's okay." So we've lost this sense of kind of responsible decorum that we used to have in American politics.
And Hillary Clinton sounded so vile and this gross accusation that she made. Is it a possibility? Do you think that she might still run for president in 2020?
I have no idea because I really don't follow politics that closely. I do find it interesting that what people accuse Trump of, they do in spades in terms of just completely jumping the shark in their rhetoric, and then they turn right around and they hit him for the same thing. The reason why I think we've been so successful in kind of analyzing the administration, what their policies are, the real impact they have, is just kind of trying to shut the rhetoric out and recognize it for what it is, and look at what people actually do. So we could talk about Gabbard's foreign policy, which I actually think is horrible. I mean, I think 99% of her foreign policy proposals are nuts.
Well, let's mention that
but that's a different issue, right?
Well,
that's the real issue.
Yeah, let's mention that just for a minute, because I made this point last week. Like, just because she's not liked by CNN, the New York Times, and Hillary Clinton, and is liked by Trey Gowdy, doesn't make her substantively interesting. And I talk most specifically about some of her views on domestic politics, but talk to us a little bit about her national security chops now that she's under a little bit more scrutiny.
Well, I mean, I think there is, and it's not Democrat, it's not Republican. There is a wing of foreign policy in this town or in the country that believes that the answer is to just walk away from everything, right? That, we shouldn't be here, we shouldn't be there, and we should just pull all our troops home and mind our own business. the problem with that logic is, we actually tried that under the Obama administration. We tried walking away from everything, and all we did was create space and gaps for bad guys to fill in, make life harder for it. Even the criticism on Trump in Syria is a bit off base. We're not, and again, the rhetoric aside of whatever the president might or might not have said, we moved troops from northern Syria to western Iraq. In terms of our fundamental missions that we're doing in Syria, counterterrorism, that's just a line in the sand. I mean, that is not strategically much of a difference, and it's certainly not walking away from the Middle East. So I just think, foreign policies are just myopically, let's just walk away from everything. I don't have much street cred with that.
Why were the troops moved there?
Well, I think it's safer for the troops. I think that's the short answer. We could leave them in the middle of a shooting war between the YPG and Turkey. We could hope that the ceasefire would hold and people would stop shooting. But the reality is in terms of the counterterrorism mission in the region, I actually think that the U.S. forces can do them just fine for Western Iraq. I think the reason why some people wanted troops to stay in Syria is I think they had this belief that somehow the U.S. was going to affect the outcome of the civil war in Syria, and which sections got more power or less power. And we never had enough troops to do that. We never had enough influence to do that. And in reality, it never made sense for American foreign policy to do that. So, I might occasionally agree with Gabbard or Senator Rand Paul, a Republican, on some things. Like, I never thought the Libyan invasion was U.S. engaging in Libya was a good idea to begin with, right? But I think sometimes those things are happenstance. What we always do is we don't say invade, don't invade, walk away, double down. What we say is what is the vital national interest of the United States? What are the capabilities you have available? What's the most efficacious way to do them? And that's what we say you should do. And whether a politician says they agree or disagree, we just call balls and strikes on that. We don't pick sides. But I think it's very, very difficult to hear that kind of analysis and discussion among political candidates. It's all just people screaming at each other.
There's an interesting piece by Council on Foreign Relations, a fellow, over the weekend in Wall Street Journal. The narrative on this is that, who's happy? Who's happy about Trump's decision? Iran is happy. Assad is happy. Turkey's happy. All of our enemies are happy. Perhaps it's a bit more complicated than that. Just 2 points. The argument that's offered by this Council on Foreign Relations policy guy is, number one, Assad has dreams of unifying Syria that have always run into Iranian resistance. This may less limit his ambitions to consolidate power in the territory. Number two, without the U.S. In presence, Iran's attempts at persuasion will do little to restrain Syria as well. He suggests that in Syria, Ankara is bound to be more powerful, Mr. Assad more reckless, the Kurds substantially weakened, the Islamic State reconstituted. None of that is good news for Iran either.
Well, people never ask the question is how could a couple of hundred Americans jump into the middle of a Syrian civil war and organize a war against the caliphate? And the answer to that's really simple. It's because everybody let them. The Iranians, the Russians, Assad, the Turks, YPG, nobody wanted the caliphate there, and they were happy to let the Americans do that. I think people confuse that somehow that small American presence that can organize operations against the caliphate was sufficient to restrain other people's ambitions in Syria. And it wasn't. It never was. It was a speed bump. Iran and Russia have always had Assad in their orbit. That doesn't change. I don't think their position's substantially improved. There's kind of no place for them to go. The Russians, they're not going to push for more than Damascus and the port. That's all they really care about. And if they wanted to, where could they go? They go south, they bump into Turkey, they bump into Israel, they bump into Iran. Similarly, Iran goes, it bumps into Israel. Matter of fact, we had a case not long ago where the Russians were standing back while the Israelis were killing or bombing Iranian assets in Syria. So the Iran doesn't have a place to go, and they're also overstretched. So I mean, I saw that article and I read it, and I said, well, what does this have to do with the reality of what's actually going on the ground and the history of what we've seen over the last 10 years? I mean, it just seems to me it starts with a premise that whatever Trump did is wrong and it has to fail, and so let me come up with some explanations. But it's not based on anything that we've actually seen in Syria happen in the last decade.
But the other takeaway, my other takeaway from that, I get your point, was this idea that the U.S. withdrawal just makes everybody happy and further empowers enemies of the United States. It's a lot more complicated than that because there are tensions with respect to the power relationships between these other actors.
Right. So what happens is by pulling the U.S. out of the picture, which arguably it never was, this notion that somehow the U.S. was tipping the balance of power in the Civil War, I just think that's simply not true.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is the U.S. helped get rid of the caliphate, and what everybody did was they just went back to squabbling over their little piece of Syria, which is what was happening before the U.S. went in. And I don't think the U.S. was capable of affecting that dynamic. And I don't think if one side had the capacity or capability to win the Syrian civil war and take advantage of the